the next session that which we have is a session is a panel discussion on the topic incorporating technology enhanced pedagogies. For this session, we have three gentlemen. Firstly, Dr. Ramesh Sharma. Dr. Ramesh Sharma is working as Director of Commonwealth Educational Media Center for Asia, better known as CEMCA, in New Delhi. He was working as Regional Director for IGNOU from July 2009 to June 2011. He was the Director of the Institute of Distance and Continuing Education at University of Guyana, South America. He is the co-editor of Asian Journal of Distance Education. He has been member of Advisory Group on Human Resources Development for the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. Welcome, Mr. Dr. Ramesh Sharma. Next on the panel, we have Mr. Viplav Bakshi. Mr. Bakshi is an education consultant and researcher with about 20 years of experience in learning and technology. He is the founder of LearnOS, a consulting entity focused on the education sector. He has rich and diverse senior management experience and have been CEO of Atelier on simultaneous based training. He has been president at Servitium, an e-learning company, a chief technological officer at egurukul.com, which was India's largest K-12 e-learning initiative, and at Liquid, a digital learning company, and was among the earliest demonstrators of e-learning technology in India at IGNOU as far as in 1997. So please welcome Mr. Viplav Bakshi. Next on the panel, we have Mr. Naveen Pathak, with whom the last session everyone enjoyed a lot. So can we have Mr. Naveen Pathak, head OER at EdTech Review? We will start with Mr. Dr. Ramesh Sharma. Sir, can we have your presentation?
Good afternoon, everyone. This theme is related to pedagogy and applications of technology in higher education. I would like to begin with this an interesting example which I read in a magazine on Outlook. This is an interesting article where the technological developments were being discussed, and that if we see the technologists, we can have two groups of them, the optimists and the pessimists. The first group is that which believes that there is a solution to all the problems and every problem. And then this group finds abundance even in scarcity, in paucity. The example of this group is like Silicon Valley. The entrepreneurs there, the technologists there, they try to find out solutions of any problem, every problem, and they are very enthusiastic about doing something which may be an issue on some problem. There are various cases also in which diversification is being noted. Particularly, take the example of Google. They started with a different set of business, and now looking forward for entering into transport business. Like in United Kingdom, already the experiments have been done for driverless cars, and in US they have successfully test run so many things. I read sometimes ago the statement by Mr. Bill Gates, presuming that the world poor, or particularly say if it is in reference to India even, may not remain poor by the next say 2020 as has been in the past due to either various schemes on related to improvement in education, improvement in health related issues and something like that. So basically this group, and the other group, the pessimist, as the name indicates, like the case of say Wall Street, where it is believed that the capitalism is or can be there due to the animal instinct. You kill to survive. In terms of technology, or particularly if we see the application of those in education sector, the Open University, the group there, were working on how the technology can be applied for learning for pedagogy, found that the kind of knowledge we are giving are preparing for the students for those kind of jobs which either do not exist currently or even may not be there for a longer time. And then how the new technologies, the people or the groups or the institutions they are working, try to institutionalize them so that their adoption can be in such a way which can lead us to, like in the previous sessions, 21st century skills, or the digital literacy of the teachers. These can be addressed. Now, currently, what are our teaching practices? Mainly focus on rote learning. Last month, I read the interview of our HRD minister, in which she cited an example of visiting a school and then found that when the students, say particularly of economics or accountancy, if they want to cite some real data into their examination answer sheets, the teachers, they tell them not to use that. Go by what has been explained in the books. And wondering that, are we not promoting rote learning only? Whatever is written in the books only should be told, because there may be an issue that if you give an answer which even the teacher may not be knowing, you may get a 0 or a low rank for your answer. An issue. Johnson and Maddox, they try to group technologies into two groups on the basis of their disruptiveness. Either the technology is replicating the existing teaching learning process, or they are allowing the students to do something which could not be done so far, or changing certain kind of dynamics of teaching learning. Here, this is quite an interesting, whenever any new technology emerges, the technology adoption life cycle, there are certain innovators which try to take risk and then create something, followed by early adopters who want to save, say, time, try out new things, and want to take an advantage of competitiveness. Then there is certain chasm, followed by people who are, say, in the case of either early majority or late majority, and there may still be certain laggards. At this stage, there are certain people, particularly for the late majority or laggards, who want some kind of social proofing or acceptance of the technology. There is a certain issue of when the three group, one of the Bean and Roger and McBeal, there, who gave this idea of their work of 1957, the diffusion and how the technology. They found that the sustainability of social technology is quite important. And a good example of it is email, the way we communicated. And they found that the more the technology is used, the economies of scale is achieved, no doubt about that. But it brings out certain other factors also.
Really ended up aping the traditional models. And long ago, I mean, even at as early as the early part of last decade, many critics said that e-learning is failing, precisely because of this. You know, the approach was to take whatever was in the classroom and push it into an online method. And many reasons for that. Over emphasis on instructional design, that was a huge one. Very individuated learning experiences, death by multiple choice, that was a huge one. People started developing models for learning design, like the ARCS model or other models. Everybody went on and started looking at Bloom's taxonomy as the Bible of how to design learning, and so on and so forth. E-learning at that time became mainstream because it was designed to solve the problems of cost by large Western corporates, mainly because of that. Very large companies all over the world found that they could convert their teaching or training programs, which are very expensive, which cost a lot of time away from work, etc., and push them into small modules that anybody could take anywhere. As a result, they saved millions of dollars and created industries in places like India, very strong for their e-learning, cookie-cutter production processes. But the focus was not really on the problems of learners and teachers. But a new revolution came in e-learning 2.0, built upon a lot of different things that were happening in the world. The rise of social media, the proliferation of the internet, the early start of mobile devices, all these started making people feel more connected and more engaged. And folks who started thinking about e-learning 2.0 started understanding the power of technology and participatory pedagogies in the learning process itself. And CMOOCs, there are two variations of MOOCs. One is called CMOOCs for connectivist MOOCs, the other is called XMOOCs for ones that actually only extended the actual failed e-learning models. CMOOCs were born out of a theory of connectivism proposed by George Siemens in 2008. And with a couple of colleagues, they ran the first ever MOOC in 2008 called Connectivism and Connective Knowledge. I was privileged to be part of that MOOC, perhaps one of the first paid learners of any MOOC worldwide, as the first 20 people who are actually paid learners. And this theory was really a confluence of a lot of different ideas of complexity, idea of chaos, idea of self-organization, adaptation. And in a way, it showed many different new things to people. For example, the people who actually created this course didn't say we'll have this curriculum. They invited people in and said, please tell us what you would like to learn. Here are broad themes, this is what we want to do, but come and tell us what you want to learn. And actually the community came back and said, we want to learn, showing their own agency. They didn't say come to a Coursera.com or a Udacity.com and look at the course material and do that, although they had a site like that. They said, go ahead, create your own space. Okay, we'll connect you in. Okay, if you want to do Ustream, go ahead, do that. You want to do Second Life, do that. You want to do a meetup and meet in some place in South Africa, go ahead, meet up. But we don't care. Let's distribute the learning process and the learning system and give more agency to the hands of the learners themselves. And so it was chaotic. It was a really chaotic model of working. But guess what? It was really very, very useful. It was very, very diverse. And therefore, a great deal of work has been done around learning networks, around personal learning environments in this context, around openness as a concept. And in particular, I'd like to point out heutagogy. So we all known about pedagogy, we all known about andragogy, but heutagogy was really focused on the self-capability or the ability of a person to take ownership of their own learning process. And of course, learning analytics was a huge thing. Now, one would have expected that folks would have looked at this model and said, wow, this is great. This is a wonderful model. Learners are independent, they are contributing, they are participating, community gets together, a lot of great things happen, a lot of diversity happens, people from Guatemala and New York City and people in India are all getting together, bringing a whole new set of diverse experiences and expertise to that one course. And this looks wonderful. But this is really not what happened. In 2011, some folks actually put together a lot of money and a lot of brand, top universities, and put together companies like Coursera and Udacity and initiatives like edX. But they only did what they were supposed to do. I mean, what they could do only was take the existing e-learning models, which had been seen to fail at scale, and push them into a very large-scale environment. So obviously, for corporates, they always knew there was no return on investment on e-learning for them. Cost got reduced, that's all, right? And they were not even able to measure it effectively, so to say. But when the XMOOCs came, the problem actually multiplied and magnified. So you got 150,000 students, but 7,000 actually did something in it. You got dropout rates. The dropout rates actually magnified and became very public once the XMOOCs came into the picture. All sorts of good things. They did collect OERs. They did go ahead and try and give a great platform for learning, democratize learning, got the best experts in place, but very, very slow to catch on the community part of it. Learning for them was traditional, not a conversation. And they understood MOOC as an acronym, which did things like, when they said massive, they say, okay, I've got 150,000 students. That was massive for them. MOOCs are not just about numbers. MOOCs are about the diversity that a very large audience brings about. The diversity in thought, the diversity in expression. That's what the M stands for, really. Openness was not free for all. A lot of people now believe that it's just free, and therefore that's what open stands for. Open doesn't stand only for free, but it stands for open participation, a culture of sharing, and all that is very important in a MOOC. Most people thought online was just for access. I've got 5 minutes. Access anywhere, anytime. Yes, it was that, but it was also for interaction. Okay, it was for making sure that conversation leads the picture, content does not lead the picture, or an expert doesn't lead the picture. The only problem I had with Dave Cormier, who coined the term MOOC, was courses. I didn't want him to say course, because a MOOC is, in that sense, not really a course. It's a bit of a misnomer. Now, our problems, I think and I believe, and my humble proposal is, that if we start accepting XMOOCs blindly, if we start translating our traditional models to larger and larger scales, I think we will fail. We'll have great issues. And we need to refocus ourselves in e-learning, in technology-enabled learning, to areas like effectiveness, retention, engagement. How do we build learning networks? We provision content for sure. How do we build learning networks? Does a teacher who is teaching any concept like, say, thermodynamics, is that teacher actually cued in to the experts in the field of thermodynamics? Is he or she actually learning from them? And is he or she sharing those links, those connections with the students so that they can grow? Or is she learning those connections from somebody else? Now that ecosystem change has to happen if we are able to leverage this. And we do need urgent change, okay, in all these different areas. And we do need people to become advocates of this change. Only then that change is going to happen. Okay? And it must start with us. At each of us, whether we are vice chancellors, directors, head of colleges, teachers, professionals in the e-learning space, it must start with us. We must engage in forums like this and outside to be able to bring this change in. And I think it marks a change in paradigm. We talked about knowing as one paradigm, which was the older paradigm. We talked about doing. So if you don't do something, you don't really learn. But being is the new paradigm. So how do you be? How do you be a great teacher? How do you be a great robotics professional? How do you be a great administrator? That being is the most important piece, shift that we've got here. And the capability to actually go ahead, learn by making connections between various things is really going to transcend the capability to know what to do. So how do we start this change? We have to start individually, and there's a not so subtle highlighting of the first letter of each line. It says change. You have to create an identity, which means you have to go out, get yourself recognized on Twitter, on LinkedIn, or social media, or whatever you like, but get connected. Okay, get your profile up there so people can discover you. Harness your networks, get other people that you know in, reach out to new people, extend your networks. It will only increase the amount of chaos and therefore the amount of learning that you will have. Advocate, participate, build a culture for sharing. Navigate technology choices as per your requirement. Don't worry about using one particular tool or two particular techniques to do things. Learn, adapt, see what works for you, and do that. Use your network to engage and integrate your network in what you're doing. I had a prof in Canada who invited me to his class. He said, I want a group of mentors for my 20-30 students that I have. That's pretty much not what is normal that you would expect. How many of us as teachers would actually go ahead and invite some other peers in some other college and say, come in, look at the work my students are doing and grade them, help me grade them, give me feedback, or encourage and motivate them. Can we do that, right? And finally, embrace a new way of being, okay? And institutionally, I think it's important to understand what MOOCs stand for. Start playing with the principles, learn, apply in your context, experiment with things. It's important to build a plan and a team so that you put things in place. And all the time look at results, keep sharing and extending. All of you learn from each other. Please share and please contribute to whatever your experiences are. Finally, Ivan Illich, 40 years back, said a great thing. And it's really important to look at what Illich said. He said that the current search for new educational funnels must be reversed into the search for the institutional inverse. And what was this institutional inverse? It was educational webs, 40 years back. Educational webs which heighten the opportunity for each one to transform each moment of his living, not learning, living, into one of learning, sharing, and caring. And that was prescient, because today we have the opportunity to do exactly that. Okay. Let's make that change happen. Thank you. Any questions or thoughts? I hate doing this one-way thing, so.
I was taking a computer organization class at George Mason University. I was doing my bachelor's, and it was an open book exam. I had my paper, and luckily I know that cyclic redundancy check. That was a question regarding it, and I saw the other student, just on my left. That question he had not missed, and that was, I think, 20-25 marks question. I know he didn't do it, and I have come from India, and I said, he didn't do it, I have done it. I'm doing the next question, so I just turned my sheet to him. He failed, he didn't copy. He's a good friend of mine. And right now, he is a vice president in a very big company in US. But he did some learning. What learning was that? That he did not copy. Some learning there is. Another thing is, in my again bachelor's class, in a communications class, a student asked a question, if I delete 0, where does it go? On my laptop, when I say delete 0, where does it go? Something happens to it, but where does it go? So I know there was some, it was 400 level series class. You know, 462, 463 was the series. It was not 101 or 102. So that's an example. I'm taking these examples, and what I mean to say is that asking these questions are very important, but learning starts long time back. Learning starts when you are a kid. If I suggest a model that after your graduation, it is not mandatory, but lack of a better word, that you do not get into a college or a company job unless you do 1 year hands-on. You have to get into the hands-on. I'm an electrical engineer, because that guy asked, if I delete 0, where does it go? There is something wrong. He is in a 4 series class. Something is missing. So ask him to work on these signals, power outlets. Ask him to do these internet connections. And I can tell you, I have seen people who have worked in, those, and when they are 18, 19, 20, and then when they get into college, they do marvelous. They do just phenomenally great. Phenomenally great. So now, another thing. If you would have heard a story where a black crow goes into a river and comes out white. There was a story I read a long time back. So black goes and white. If white goes and comes out white, river has made no change. But if black goes and white comes out, river has made some change. So white goes, white comes out, that's IIT. Right? If black goes and white comes out, that's something else. So which is more powerful? White goes and white comes out? The black goes and white comes out. Because that's where we need more attention, because those are already driven people. They already found questions to their answers. They have done that. So leave them on side. So, right, one technology. Professor Sharma and Viplav both are experts. So whatever they have shared, I cannot repeat that because that's coming out from the horse's mouth. That's coming out from the expert. So take that part. But one part is learning comes here when 200 billion neuron connections, and you fire one in the morning. Oh damn! Now it's every day the whole day is damn, because 200 billion connections multiplied by 5,000, it goes to 1,000 trillion connections. It can go up to. So minimum are 125 trillion connections. 1,000 times more than the stars in our galaxy are the connection in just cerebral cortex, cerebral part, this big. Imagine the best technology lies on your shoulder, nowhere else. The best technology, you can't beat it. You just cannot beat it. Impossible. Consciously you may say, let's do this, let's do that, but subconsciously beat the hell out of you. You cannot compete. First of all, have belief that you can make a change. Unless that belief, there is no connection. And we got to go deep down. We got to go into the science of learning. We got to bring that up. I'm going to show you a small video. And so I told you that I trained some kids and in some brain things, some brain exercises. And then I asked them to do whatever they want to do home. I'd go home and do it. Someone built, it's 9-year-old kid built a 3D model of the brain with clay and colored it. Frontal cortex, parental cortex, and then colored an amygdala, and everything colored. You know what I did? 20 kids, 5 kids sit together. It's a memory game. I first made them remember some words, which they will use it not knowing what it means. I said, that's okay, just use it. And memory game. Memory game is if I say Naveen, Viplav have to say Naveen Viplav, Sharmaji have to say Naveen Viplav Sharmaji, XYZ. Then I say XYZ, Naveen Viplav Sharmaji XYZ. Then XYZ says ABC. And then memory games go. So they started to come up with the memory started to increase. I'm giving them something else. You see, when you're running analytics, why I'm saying that? When you're running analytics behind the scenes, analytics may say, this guy takes time in reading. English is not his forte. We got to look into those and build as learning into the system. We got to go behind the scenes. So I am, without going behind the scenes, first of all, I'm bringing that into those small kids. Now see this small video, I created it, and I am the one video recording it. And you got to see what happens, where did it go? Okay. Can I have audio, please? See, this is a computer expert right in the middle. I asked him to come to my class. And all these kids are less than 10, one may be 11.
That is also part of something called
Every
computer comes with a motherboard that has the CPU that is the core processing unit of that computer. No, it's very strong spot. This is the memory. Now, sometimes you see people say my computer is very slow, it's not working fast enough, right? You click on it and you wait and it takes
Minimize the window.
response.
Lot of things happening. Okay, the real learning was happening there. The collaboration learning was happening there. The community was there. The community of group, all of them trying to outbeat the other one. The gamification was happening there. What happened? Anyways, you got the picture, if it comes up. So the learning was happening right there. The gamification, why? Because they were competing. They were not competing like they have to compete. Well, I know it first. How do you open it up? That's a memory. What is a memory? And that expert is opening up the laptop, and he closed the laptop, and they learn various parts, and they are so engaged into it. And once they come out of it, Dad, can I get a laptop? I want to open it up. That's all I need. I need at that point of time, if I attack, learning happens. Those connections are built. They get built for life. Now let's bring that into. And then when we put that technology and go behind the scenes and learn analytics, we learn a lot. We learn a lot. But remember, analytics can go thus far because the privacy issues comes up. I'm just putting it up front because then I know how you behave. And then I market you things accordingly. So I'm just going to a level where I help these kids to understand. So these technologies exist, the MOOCs, the Coursera's, they are putting up the learning behind. In one of the Coursera's course, a course was given in German, and there were some French students taking the course. In the end, they figured out they were not taking the course, they were learning German language. A lot of things coming out from that data. A lot of things are being built. So we are looking technology as just an enabler. The best technology is the one that you don't even know you're using it. Earlier you would take a newspaper and you read it and you say, it's newspaper reading. But now when I'm using internet to look Times of India. Yeah, now you don't say I'm using internet. You say, yeah, I read that news online. Internet is like...
The machine that makes...
There it is. Anyways, the students are asking questions, he's answering. So that's how it's going.
Around within these two is right below this. It's called CPU. That is also part of something called motherboard. Yes. Every computer comes with a motherboard.
Now this is quite a while back. I uploaded it 2013 November.
That has the CPU that is the core processing unit of that computer. No, it's very strong spot.
So that's it. Let's not digress from the point. So we can build various models. As the flipped classroom, the blended learning is said, you know, how MIT course, one of the University of Irvine, California, a faculty took Anant Agarwal's EDX President's Electronics course, and a day before the class, he will send that material. When they come to the class, they are prepared, and he says who knows and who does not know. The student says, I do not know. Then they discuss it up. Then they form a group. And then he says, everybody ready in 20-25 minutes. All the questions are answered. Then he called one by one, and he you know, quiz them. And by the end of the class, he has judged them. The class is over. Now that's one part, one way of using that material which is online. So this is real case study, and the pass percentage rose from 64% to 94% in that class in one semester. Now that's the value. So the content part, it came from OER, one way I'm saying, but the other is putting some pedagogies on top of it. MOOC is a phenomenal model. OER, I say, is the mother of MOOC, but then MOOC is a phenomenal model that came out. And I absolutely agree with Viplav that the CMOOC is really will bring more value, but money and some branding and, you know, the name, Stanford name, who will say no to Turn? Oh, why would somebody say no? Millions of dollars, $60 million EDX, $68 million with Coursera, some $40 million with Udacity, some $48 million with Udemy. So money is coming because those big guys have the name. But they're building some models onto it. But not only that, see, US government has started to play a role into it. You know what they're doing? They're inviting students from all over the world in the US embassies. For example, Delhi, you call US embassy and you will find they will be running a MOOC. And they'll be inviting them there. What are they doing with the MOOCs in India? They're selling American education. Because we are so good, so you come. MOOC was solving a different problem in America. MOOC must solve a different problem in India. The problems are very different. So if you're implementing MOOCs, you got to consult an expert, because you have to know what the goal that you are trying to achieve and how you're going to use those technologies in a classroom, because you want something out of it. You want your students to do better. In the end, they want job. I mean, I agree with that part. In the end, they want job. They're looking for it. But that it's not, you know, if I were to become an engineer, I could have gone to a library. If OER content is free, it is there, then I can. But I cannot become an engineer. Somebody has to help me out. So a faculty comes in, he brings some pedagogy, some style. And then the experts can help you out. And you have to know how other universities in the world are using it. I am telling you, if there are universities here, become a part of such consortiums. One of that consortium is OE Consortium. Open Education Consortium. Become a member of that consortium. And then learn from them, connect with them. Not only coming to this event, but go to the events in Canada, in US, in Brazil. They did it where Mr. Ramesh Sharma made a presentation. So these are you have to know if you have to compete in the market, if you have to be there. You know, the weakest link in India, I mean, you go to any college and the student cannot do that's the weakest link. I mean, can we stand on IIT? No. Leave IIT aside. Let there be no IIT. The system has to have that a very good student in a class, give him some extra coaching in a separate class, because the competition is going to happen among some different kids. You got to nurture them. Brain is enormously powerful. Join brain with learning. You know, an experiment was done. I just love to bring some experiments, so don't mind it. An experiment was done where, you know, they staged everything and they had a camera and they said there is shooting happening, and they invited some people. But they were experimenting on them. And they showed a red car coming, and then there was another car coming. They did not know shooting was happening somewhere else. But they saw a car coming. It's like hindsight. You know, they see coming. And they suddenly see this car coming is not stopping. But then it hits another car. Now what they did was, they separated two groups. And to one group they asked, a cop, but not a real cop, but here comes a cop. He says, did you see that car smashing into the other car? Yes. What was the speed of it? 40, 45, 50, 40, 45, 50, 35, 40, 55. Okay. And the other, did you see the red car bumped into it? What happened? 20, 15, 25. I said I used different words, lack of time. I used two words, bumped and I used smashed. You know how using those words made an impact on their brain and they changed the speed. We got to be aware. Language, that has to come into learning. It has to become a part of you. Part of you. The word smashed was used. Everybody said the speed of that car was 40, 45 because smash in the brain interprets it like something smashed into it. And the other one bumped into it, 25, 20, the two groups standing together. So we got to bring many more things into learning so that a teacher can interpret, a teacher can help student, teacher has to be himself trained, herself trained, so that they can bring those styles into the classroom. I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Pathak. Now we are open to the audience for questions, if any.
What I think, listening to Mr. Pathak, when all three of you were brilliant, I wish we had more of this. And what I feel is when you talked about MOOC and what India requires, I feel with a lot of higher education, there's more sense of alienation. A farmer's son who becomes an engineer is no more a farmer. He is not being empowered to become a better farmer. And he cannot manage his heritage or the knowledge base that the family has, the assets they have, the natural resources that they have. So it is draining out the country when we follow the MOOCs of the Western country. It's not only knowledge base, it's topics like justice, law, many things is going to affect the country if we follow the Western knowledge base. And I think we in the formal system and of course the non-formal need to have a very, very detailed understanding of what this country needs in terms of MOOCs and create in our own language. That's very important. We need to reach right to the grassroots level and across all the ages. There's a lot of work to be done. Thank you.
Yeah, we have a question from.
This is Dr. Ajay, and all the three speakers have been fantastic in their presentation. My curiosity goes to Dr. Ramesh Sharma. Sir, you have spoken about diffusion process in your presentation. I think that diffusion model was created in 60s or 70s. So we are living in a IT era where the technology is taking every day one step ahead. So this diffusion process has 5 stages, and starting from innovator to it goes up to laggards. So do you think that that diffusion process is still means useful in contemporary environment where it is very hard to find laggards? Because if you see, take the example of mobile. Today, the new mobile model will come and after 3 or 4 months or 2 months, it will disappear. You won't find even any part of that. So your view on that point?
Thank you so much. In fact, this is very interesting and I am sad and it's quite unfortunate that that is true. And particularly if you see the case of teachers, I think that still happens. As a part of the kind of training which we are providing, we still find that. And it's a big difference between the digital literacy, particularly we see it from that point of view. And if you go to the website of New Media Consortium, their report, there is also a concern that how we can bridge that gap, the level of competence of the students and the teachers. You will still find that there is a technophobia exists in the teachers. About students, I know, and that's why I gave that example of Idea Internet, that the boy. And there are many, that series, they have a good example of showing how. But unfortunately, and what sometimes I feel that in case of various innovations, like if I take the example of educational sectors, we believe that there are 5 revolutions in the field of education. The first revolution was the invention of printing press in Germany. That was the first one, because prior to that, the knowledge was transmitted verbally. The teacher was teaching, students were listening from one generation to another generation, from one place to another place, and those verbal communication was going on, and the message, as Naveenji told that, over a period of time, as a part of our even personality also, the brain has to create space for new things, so we forget. And then the radio was followed by television was followed by computers were followed by www, internet, and finally leading to the mobile technologies. If you see various sectors, you will find that the technology has been easily adopted by others. Transports, business, telecommunication, even health sector. See their application per se in education, we lag behind. That's why sometimes. And definitely there is a certain, sometimes we try to see that unless it has some sort of social approval, where the technology has been established, accepted, and then they go about it. And particularly, I feel that when we talk of literacy, not only digital literacy, even simple literacy, you see, nowadays we don't ask, do you have a mobile? We ask, who doesn't have a mobile? Because we believe that everyone has a mobile. And to this large masses, who has taught them using mobile phones? No one. It is self-learning by them. Be it the well or the poor people. That kind of concept. So somehow, in case of education, I believe it exists. And the teachers, they are still apprehensive. Long back, I think last year, we had gone for a training on open educational resources, and we were telling the people, still there were some, not only they were school teachers, they were college teachers. And they were not, due to their, maybe the kind of infrastructure available to them. But initially, we had to teach some of them how to use a computer mouse.
Thank you. We'll take the last question from Mr. Rao. Yeah.
My basic question is, are we moving ahead or are we sliding down? Scale was shown that we are 83rd or we are 123rd or 174, whatever that is in the list. We had Nalanda, Takshila, Amartya Sen, after a couple of years, is put in his papers. Is it our obsession with the West and the technology, driven for various reasons, mostly economic? Are we going ahead in our education, in real sense of the term education, which used to be in the days of Takshila, Nalanda and all, or we are just kind of driven or obsessed by jobs, employability, and we are forgetting the real education. My point is that if we focus on real education, like it used to be in the days, olden days, even I would say when I studied, we talked of learning. That time we had no computers, we had no calculators or things like that. My teacher taught me the mental math by making our hands put on our head and he used to ask questions. We had that art that time. How come we are, as I said, getting obsessed by all that and forgetting our real education, what used to be? My point is, am I right or you agree or there are some comments on that?
Mr. Bakshi, would you like to take that question?
Difficult to answer the question in a very short period of time, but on the whole, I would agree and disagree. Agree because there are some real values of education system through the years, because there are theories of education that have gone across the years, and some of them are very universal, some of them very valid, some of them are very valid even now. Whether it's old, ancient, or whether it's today. I disagree because you can't do things the same way you were doing 1,000 years ago. You can't. I mean, it's impossible. Today, the level of specialization in knowledge, okay, the amount of diversity, the amount of information available itself is too huge. And if you were to just say that, some techniques may definitely work. Maybe this technique would may definitely work. I'm not disputing techniques or philosophies. Maybe the Gurukul system is great and it should be done here in smaller ways. Yes. But on the whole, with changes in the society, with changes in culture, with changes in the technology, in costs, in new inventions, we must adapt and change.
So my point was, I certainly agree with you. My point was, are we getting obsessed and blindly following this rather than being selective?
Again, I would agree and disagree. I wish we were obsessed about CMOOCs, I really wish we were obsessed with connectivism as a theory. I really wish there would be a lot of things we would be obsessed with. The West has produced. Canada was the country that produced MOOCs. Okay, they devised MOOCs. Yeah, we need obsession. If we don't have the right kind of obsessions, we won't change.
Actually just, yeah, we are obsessed, and I think, as entrepreneurs, we got to be obsessed with certain things, but we should know when we have to get out. The problem is we are not taught. Learning, we have to learn how to unlearn also. That's also a learning, and that's very difficult.
But we should be willing to fail.
Fail. Yes, we should be willing to fail. Absolutely.
Let's say I'm obsessed today about connectivism and MOOCs, CMOOCs, and tomorrow we find conclusive evidence that really it's not a very practical thing to do, or XMOOCs I'm very against tomorrow. Why don't we allow for people to fail? Let them fail. Let them learn. I think there should be no objection against trying out any technology, any kind of learning process whatsoever. But let's be informed about what we're doing. I think that's very important.
Some change in our culture, some change in our behavior. Just on sidelines. I visited some colleges, and when Vice Chancellor comes, everybody stands and then bow. I don't understand that. I do not understand when a minister comes, everybody has to clap hands, and I don't understand these things. These things have to change. I don't know, I see it from outside and I get baffled with that feeling. We got to be obsessed. Indians are obsessed. They always have to be first. Don't have to say that. There was a song I was listening, India has to be first. Who's saying India has to be first? Be passionate about what you're doing. Be passionate about it. And if you're doing it, you will win Nobel Prize. But you cannot say, for Nobel Prize I'm doing it. You're doing it for the love of the game. We don't have to be first. We don't have to be, say, richest in India. I just fail to understand that. Some part in our culture has to change. Obsession is very good. It can lead to some results which you don't want. It can lead to results which are phenomenal. Look at Khan Academy, he was not looking for something. Look at Uber. Look at WhatsApp. These technologies are connecting us together. Sitting somewhere in the world, we are getting connected. But of course, in the past, few things would have happened. If I say in Mahatma Gandhi, if internet was there at the time of Mahatma Gandhi, what would have happened? I don't know. If there were some models where Einstein would have, it took him 14 years to work on his general theory of relativity, maybe it took him 2 years to do that. So technology would have played some role then, and I'm very sure it's going to change with epigenetics, which is coming, a new field. Things are going to change. Our whole thinking is going to change. Our behaviors are going to change. You will be able to practically see while walking and there's a cycle coming and then you get mad at him. You can see what part of your brain is getting stimulated and, oh, no, stop it, stop, don't get angry, it's okay. Technology is going to advance so big time. What I do not want is India to lose. Industrial revolution was gone, atom theory was gone, computer is gone, internet is gone, brain science is coming up, they can catch up very, very well. But I think they're going to leave it, and then genetics, epigenome, things are coming. We have to put R&D, we don't have it. We want quick results. An entrepreneur in US may take 6 years before he says he retires. In India, it is 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. Business does not give up, I have to give up. It is not giving me money. We got to spend time. We got to be passionate. We got to be obsessed. And let us fail.
I think we can take this outside at the tea session at the end. Thanks a lot, Dr. Sharma, Mr. Bakshi, and Mr. Pathak for a very informative session. And big round of applause for them. And I would like to call Utkarsh on stage to felicitate all the 3 panelists. First, first Dr. Sharma. Mr. Biplab Bakshi. And our own Mr. Naveen Pathak.